Ladies and gentlemen, here we are again, Hudson County Review Live. I'm your host, the personification of ground game god global, John R. Highness. Today we're joined again with Jersey City Mayor Stephen Fulop. Steve, great to have you again.
Thanks for having me.
So Steve, it was about 1 year ago that we sat down just down the hall, and we were talking about the fight between the Hudson County Democratic Organization. Obviously, at that time, you and State Senator Stack were thinking of going in another direction with the county executive, so moved the calendar forward a year. And, there was a unity event last night where yourself, Senator Stack, Governor Murphy, all supporting the re-election of Tom DeGeese. So at what point did you guys decide to put the past behind and get together for the greater good?
Well, let me start by saying we clearly lost. So that was clearly a statement by the county committee, which we respect. Subsequent to that, after maybe a couple of months or weeks, we started to have a little bit more conversations about, why that happened the way it happens. Not really like pointing fingers or blame, but just kind of talking through what the concerns were and how it started and where the conversations went, and things that were concerning from our standpoint, things that were concerning from Tom's standpoint, from Amy's standpoint, and it's probably took 6-7 months to kind of mend the relationships and build some bridges there, and where we're situated today is pretty good. We have a lot of conversations about government stuff. I'm more engaged directly. In previous years, we would go through using a lot of maybe, other people within our office to have those relationships, and I find it better that I'm engaging directly in that stuff, and we're in a good place today.
Okay, so on the topic of the Hudson politics, It's every election cycle, everybody's talking about, well, what's Steve going to do? Is he running for mayor again? Is he running for Senate? Is he running for Congress? So between now and 2021, what are you envisioning?
Look, I'm running for mayor again, and I don't think our work is done here. I feel like we've had a meaningful amount of change. I think some of the things that I hoped would happen a lot quicker, and what you realize is that government is a slow moving animal, and a lot of the things are on deck. I'd like to see them through, and I think it's going to take a little more time.
Yeah, so on that point, some officials have said that you know who I'm talking about, have said that you initially said you were only going to do 2 terms. Obviously, that's changed. So it happens, but what do you think about people bringing that up and making that part of the conversation?
Look, anybody can make anything about the conversation. It'll go to the voters, and voters will decide on what they think is best. My initial goal was to do 8 years, and then people said he's only going to do 4 years, and then here we are looking at kind of where we are, and decided to run for re-election. We're in the second term. Some of the things that were important to me, the bigger projects that we have, some of them I touched on in the state of the city, like Bayfront, like the museum project, like the 3rd building for the City Hall Annex. Those things are slower than I actually thought, between bid specs and getting them out and environmental components, and I'd like to see those projects that we started through. And then you have some challenges like the school funding situation, right? We're obviously taking proactive steps on it. I want to see it get fixed, and I'd like to be part of it and see it through.
So I'm glad you brought up the school funding. Obviously, that's, we could easily do a half hour on that alone, I'm sure. But as you're aware, it's a big budget, $609 million, $120 million shortfall. Could be up to 600 layoffs. I'm sure that won't happen. But, it's concerning numbers when you just take a look at it from afar. So, I know there's only so much you can do from City Hall. But, what do you think are some proactive measures or even reactive measures that can be taken at this point?
So I don't know in detail the budget structure at the Board of Ed, right? And I've tried my best over the last couple of years to be supportive when they've asked, have a good dialogue with whoever the superintendent is and board members, be helpful, and be less engaged in the politics. When you go back 5 or 6 years, clearly I was more engaged politically on that front, and I felt like it created more issues and controversy for around the stuff I was trying to accomplish here in City Hall. And even though some of those concerns were unwarranted, we live in an environment where rumors have disproportionate amount of opportunity to amplify. And so I decided to kind of less engage in that front, more engaged in kind of the government front. So what are we doing? Obviously we passed the payroll tax. We're going to continue to defend that, and we're working, really closely with all the payroll provider companies here in the area and the Hudson Chamber in order to kind of make sure that we maximize the collection on that. The second thing that we're doing is we've obviously changed the whole tax abatement policy. We've canceled some tax abatements. That's going to obviously yield additional dollars for the Board of Ed immediately, $2 million this year. We're looking at different shared services opportunities. Immediately this year we're doing some sanitation and some police stuff, take the costs away from the Board of Education. There are opportunities next year and down the road on stuff like snow plowing, on recreation, but those are bigger conversations, because once you start touching recreation, overlapping with the schools, you want to make sure that everybody's on the same page and it's not done in kind of this quick knee-jerk sort of way. So there's more opportunities for us, and we'll continue to work with them on it.
So on the topic of tax abatements, you said during the State of the City something along the lines of that they became like a drug that Jersey City mayors were addicted to. And I think your administration somewhere in the neighborhood of about 80 abatements over the past 5 years?
Well, I mean, look, so people throw out all sorts of numbers, 50, 80. When you break those down, right, and you actually look at what got an abatement, you would see a couple things. You would see out of those 80, a large number of them are affordable housing projects. And affordable housing projects, because of the matching grants and HMFA at the state of New Jersey and the tax credits, they require a tax abatement from local municipalities. So start there. What I said when I ran in 2013 was that we would phase out tax abatements downtown, which we did almost immediately, right? There was a very small number of projects that we did downtown in Wardy. Each of them were kind of unique. They were maybe an 80-20 project, large affordable housing,
sure, or
they were condos, because we were trying to move in the direction of condos versus rentals, so we experimented a little bit with that. But we didn't do market rate rental tax abatements the way it's been done in the past. Then we incentivized tax abatements to other parts of the city, as we said we would. I think most people would say that, Journal Square, the West Side, never saw any development at any point in the last 25 years. So what we said was, why should they not have the same advantages or opportunities that downtown has? So we moved the tax abatement structure to there to start getting that going, and then we've gradually curtailed that as well. So I don't think I deviated from anything that I said. I think we were very careful with the plan. We've executed that plan, and I think the city's budget is stronger because of that. There's always going to be critics, and I don't really get in the weeds on that.
Fair enough. It's usually not productive, but needless to say. But on the topic of school funding still, and while we're talking about abatements, so Trustee Matt Shapiro has probably been the one person that I know has been very vocal on the board there, saying that the city really hasn't shouldered their weight, hasn't done their role in funding the schools. And he didn't name any names, so I'm not sure how far back he's looking, but, I mean, what do you think about that perspective? I mean, it's obvious that the state has underfunded the district, enormously, but what do you think of this, differing perspective here?
I don't know if it's a differing perspective. I mean, I would just look at the numbers. I mean, our administration has funded more dollars to the schools than anybody in the history of Jersey City. We have maxed out our potential contribution whenever we could. It's escalated every single year. We find opportunities for shared services. The city did have a cap via the state as far as what we could contribute before, and we've met that. So for somebody to say that the city hasn't met their obligation legally, I would argue that point. Predating us, I can't speak to any previous administrations. And as far as how the Board of Education structured their own budget, there's some blame there as well, and there's also some blame for the state. I mean, the state was in control of the Jersey City budget for 30 years, and we find ourselves in a worse predicament today than we were when they took over 30 years ago. And the fact that then they hand it over to us and say, by the way, we're cutting funding after we helped create this situation is grossly unfair. But we're in this situation, we got to solve it together.
All right, very good. So, on a different topic, I know at the State of the City you also brought up introducing the first city-run bus system in the state.
Yep.
So, I know a study needs to be conducted and then an RFP process and all that, but I mean, in an ideal world, how do you envision this working out?
So, the way I want to kind of approach this is looking at different technology providers that have offered bus services in other cities that aren't the traditional set fixed route bus systems. They're focused on kind of a hybrid between that traditional bus system and what you see with kind of Uber, Lyft type technology. And it doesn't exactly pick you up at your door, but it certainly maps and kind of targets areas in close proximity and then transports those areas where it's designated to be into the path system. And so there are providers that we're looking at that would have Jersey City branded vans and buses using certain areas or patrolling certain areas, picking residents up and then moving over to the target destinations that we put out in the RFP. And that might be grocery stores, path stations, etc. We're working with the councilwomen on that. So our goal in the RFP is to have it specifically targeted to areas not downtown. So the buses would have the geographic areas of West Side, Greenville, or the Heights, so they wouldn't be in Ward C or Ward E, and for pickups, and the only places they would go would be to transport and drop off in those areas, and then back into the geographic area where they're patrolling for pickups. And I think that that's kind of where the bus mass transit opportunities for the 21st century will be, in using technology as opposed to just using that traditional fixed line.
I mean, it sounds like a great idea. Do you have any idea at this point what sort of cost this is going to be like? So
we budgeted $2 million for it, and kind of some initial estimates that we've got has been anywhere from $1 to $3 million. So we think we're in that range, and it really depends on how much are we subsidizing the rates when somebody gets picked up. Is it free? Is it the same rate as the light rail? Is it the same rate as the path? And then what are the hours that we're going to have them actually working within that geographic area? So if you have them on set hours, let's say 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., it's obviously different than if you have them on 24-hour rotation. So we're looking through all that stuff. The RFP will kind of go out there and solicit responses, and then we'll see what we got.
All right, makes sense. So another thing...
And I just want to say also, we're still doing the bus rapid transit study. The challenges with that really are kind of balancing out some of the parking issues. So in order to do the bus rapid transit in a real thoughtful and correct way, it would mean that you'd have designated lanes for the buses to move quicker through the city. And if you think about kind of the south side of the city, and you look at Martin Luther King Drive or Ocean Avenue, which would be the best corridors to kind of start on the south side of the city, there are 2 lanes, right?
Right.
And that would mean that you would probably have to turn one lane into a bus route, which would eliminate parking, or you'd have to think about moving one of them into a one-way in one direction, another one in another way in another direction. And those are some substantial changes. So we got to kind of think through whether the community wants the trade-off of having better access to mass transit in the traditional way versus losing some parking, which is a very, very valuable commodity in a city.
I would say so.
Yeah.
Speaking of parking issues, perhaps a bit random, but what's the deal with street sweeping 4 times a week? I mean, is that just the way it's always been, or what?
Well, look, I think, first of all, we're out to purchase, I think at the next council meeting, 10 new sweepers. So some of the sweepers are dated and they could do a better job, and we're trying to improve the fleet on that. look, I think residents want to see their streets clean, and they demand that service. And if you reduce street sweeping to 2 times a week, as some council people have proposed, I think you would see the streets being dirtier for sure. And I think the residents would argue, I'm getting half the service for the same amount in taxes. And if you're reducing the services 50% on that portion, I want to see a reduction in taxes as well. And none of the people who have proposed the street sweeping have proposed any sort of solution that includes that. And that to me is a problem.
All right, does sound like a problem.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So another thing you talked about on Wednesday was lead remediation. I mean, we don't hear too much about this here in Jersey City or Hudson, but we hear a lot about it in Newark and some Bergen County municipalities, and it's a joint effort between the city, the Board of Education, and the Municipal Utilities Authorities. So just tell us about that.
So we don't have the same problems that they have. We monitor our lead levels on a regular basis. We get all the reports from the testing. I'm obviously very engaged in that because you read about it, whether it's Flint, Michigan, or whether it's Newark, New Jersey, and obviously it has a lasting impact on a child's development if they're exposed to high lead levels. And we want to make sure that our drinking water is safe, and we're very, very conscious of it. So we know also that some of the infrastructure within the schools has lead pipes in it. And some of the schools have tested at higher levels, and that's why the schools have been providing, water bottles as opposed to allowing the fountains, so to speak, for the students. And from our standpoint, I think that no school should be like that, and we want to fix it. So we've been going back and forth with the Board of Education. We're going to start in 2 schools, one in Greenville and one downtown, and we're going to start on the pilot programs, I believe, next month. Those schools were selected because they have higher lead levels, and that's what we based it on. And then once we know that the filters are successful and curing the problem, then we'll expand that into every single school that's needed in the city, and our objective is to have it entirely fixed by January 2020.
All right. Now, going on a completely different spectrum here. So, as you're well aware, at the beginning of the year, the Jersey City Employment and Training Board fired their executive director, Jim McGreevy. And at the time, there was about 24 or so residents that were worried about a loss of services at that facility.
Yeah.
And the Reentry Corporation has since moved to Kearney. So, a lot of changes there. So, I mean, could you just tell us any updates? I mean, I understand it's an autonomous agency and all, but anything that's going on over there, and just letting us know on how that's been working ever since his departure.
Yeah, so my communication with them has been that the most important thing to me is to get effective leadership there immediately. And I've been communicating with the board chair, Sudan, who's also acting now in kind of an executive director capacity, that they need to post the job description and accept applications almost immediately and set up a committee that will review those applications that is independent of, kind of the politics and the concerns that have predated all of the things that have happened in the last couple months. And he's said that they're working on that, and that should be happening shortly. And that's where we are right now. I obviously had concerns. I think CDBG had concerns. The county had concerns about funding issues and where dollars were going. Were dollars that were meant for Jersey City being diverted to other locations directly or indirectly around the state of New Jersey? Were we maximizing our obligations outside of just the reentry component, which is important, but also about youth employment, also about unemployed residents that don't have criminal records? Were we doing the best that we can on those fronts, or were we just focused on that reentry population? And so where we are today is hopefully to refocus JSEP with a priority being Jersey City residents, and not only focusing on the reentry front, still having a focus there, but broadening it a little bit more so that residents feel when they go there and they don't have a record and they need help, that they get the same level of service.
So, as you just alluded to, you've said previously that it appeared that the then director McGreevy put some funds where they shouldn't have gone, and his response, as you know, on the record many times, has been that it had nothing to do with that. It's that he fired Eugene McKnight, who's worked as a political operative in Jersey City. So, obviously, it sounds like you don't agree with that.
Well,
but
look, like I said earlier, I mean, anybody could say any sort of accusation and it gets amplified. If the governor felt that way, he should follow up and show why he thinks that way. Otherwise, it's like a baseless accusation. I've never communicated with the governor on Gene McKnight or anybody on that board, and I've always said the same exact thing. When somebody's accused of doing something wrong, we bring it forward to the proper authorities at the county, and the city, or the state, law enforcement, and let them take the necessary steps. If somebody felt that Gene McKnight was doing something improper, by all means, they should take it to those authorities and play it out. Him being relieved of his duties was a concern that the board had with regards to dollars and where they were spent, and it wasn't only done by the board. As I said earlier, the county had concerns, the state of New Jersey had concerns, and obviously the city had concerns, and they use federal dollars and local dollars, and making sure that all those dollars are accounted for where they were initially designated to go is really important, and that's a challenge, and that was a problem.
Now, some say that, as you just mentioned, if there was, any sort of impropriety, they should go to the higher authority. Some say that that's already happened. Are you hearing that that's the case?
With regards to what?
Some say that the FBI is investigating Eugene McKnight for whatever he did at JSEP.
I mean, look, I couldn't speak to that. I mean, nobody's spoken to me about it, but I believe that Jim reported that, and as we said initially, when Jim brought forward that he had concerns, we said, here's the right thing to do, is bring it to the necessary authorities, whatever you think that is. Is it the county prosecutor? Is it the U.S. attorney? Is the FBI? We would never say not to, regardless of a personal relationship. So I would have expected that if Jim had concerns about impropriety, that he would have done that, and that's the right thing to do.
All right. Makes plenty of sense. So, beyond JSEP, I know that you were also talking about some community endeavors during the State of the City. So you were talking about, keeping the reservoir open full time, acquiring some new land at CarePoint, and, some recreational things. So tell us a little bit about those endeavors.
Yeah, so a couple different initiatives on the open space that'll start by early fall. So Fulton Park is going to be out to bid, and I didn't touch on that, and that's going to be a little bit repurposed from what it was initially. Initially, it was supposed to kind of wrap around a building and partially on Fulton, partially on MLK, and what engineering thought was that it would be a smarter thing to build the park in the current parking lot for the Bethune Center, and then use that area across the street that would have been the park as the parking area. And this way you'll have a larger open space and outdoor area across from the Bethune Center, a brand new park on MLK. You'll have visibility from the Bethune Center as opposed to the park that was planned, which didn't really have great visibility, and we'll have parking in the other area. So that's going out to bid. We've been working with Jermaine Robinson on that and Michelle Massey, and we're really excited about that. That'll be a large park. We're redoing the Newark Avenue Pedestrian Plaza. The whole surface was temporary from the beginning because we wanted to experiment with it. I think it has been a success. I think most business owners would say it's been a success, even on the expansion, and we want to make sure that it feels like a destination place. So we're going to be putting pavers down, redoing the lighting, and it'll really look terrific. We're going to be raising the street so that there's more outdoor seating, and putting grates in on the sewer system, which we're working on right now, and that's really terrific. I touched on the fact that Berry Lane Park is going to have the bathroom built and the pavilion. That's starting next month, and we have the dollars finally for that Tony Hawk skate park. So Berry Lane will be completed, which will be another great milestone for us. And then we talked about CarePoint. An opportunity arose with the state of New Jersey that they were looking to get rid of some land behind CarePoint. It's a long, narrow stretch of property, and so when we looked at it, we thought, you know what, we can actually move the parking from where it is today to that location. It's better use use on this kind of long, narrow stretch, and then the current parking area we'll turn into an additional ball fields. And so I think that we're going to be able to acquire that property hopefully within the next couple months as well. I mean, we're on the goal line with that. So, and then the reservoir. So obviously this has been a big initiative for Councilman Michael Yun and Rich Bociano. Going back maybe 6 years, the city had a plan that, or a cost estimate of this plan for the reservoir to give access that would be close to $10, $12 million at the time. And we met with the Parks Coalition and the city architects and engineering who've been doing a lot of work in the reservoir, in-house recently. And what I conveyed was that I had a hard time understanding why it was $10 to $12 million relative to other parks that we were building throughout the city. If you think about what the request is really just to build a walking trail around, something that is accessible, clean, safe, and obviously lighting is a part of it, and fencing is a part of it. And those would be the initial steps to make it something that people could go into all the time. And we went back to engineering, and they came back that if we did most of it in-house, some of it outsourced, and met those three objectives, which was fencing, lighting, and a path around it, you'd be looking at the $2.1 million cost. And so we've prioritized that in our budget because we think that's attainable. And that will meet the objective of the councilman and will add valuable open space to the city. So that's kind of on our radar screen as well. The only challenge that we have there is the historic components of it, which is kind of just an additional hurdle at the state and local that we need to go through to make sure that anything we change in there meets historical standards.
All right. Well, looks like open space is...
It's good. It's good. It's a priority. So the city's growing and changing, and we're doing our best to make sure that we do it in a way that adds kind of these valuable community resources.
All right. Just as I was walking into 280 Grove this morning, you sent out a press release regarding your continued support of marijuana legalization. The state lawmakers will be voting on that on Monday. What do you think? I mean, this is something we've been talking about for at least a year now, and obviously we're not there yet. But I mean, what's your read on the situation?
Well, we sent something out today, and it was Mayor Baraka and I. Obviously, we're very close friends. We've been in lockstep on this for quite some time, and both of us had some real concerns with the bill that they're voting for on Monday. We don't think the expungement goes far enough. We don't think it's fast enough. We're not happy with the lack of dollars allocated to it, but we also recognize that it'll immediately help tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 plus people, and that to us is a priority. So, we're advocating for support, even though the votes aren't there. There's a lot of people on the fence, and hopefully our voices can help move some of the legislature into a direction of supporting it. Do I think that they're going to have the votes on Monday? I mean, it looks pretty tough right now, and I think it would be another missed opportunity for New Jersey.
Do you see this getting resolved before the budget, before the end of the year? I mean, how long do you think this is going to drag out? I mean, it's just your opinion. I mean, we don't know, obviously.
Yeah,
but
look, I couldn't speak to that. I mean, I'm not in the weeds on kind of the Trenton politics.
Pun intended?
Right. Look, on the local level, we try and push initiatives, get them done, move forward, visible change, and you have to be accountable. I think once you get further away from residents, whether it's at the state level or federal level, that changes as well because you don't have the same accountability to people. And so will this happen? It's hard for me to tell. And will there be repercussions for legislators that don't vote? Or probably not, because people don't feel that same direct connection that they do to a council or mayor. So I couldn't speak to the Trenton politics. I'm hopeful, but I'm skeptical.
All right, reasonable answer.
Yeah.
So, on another topic again, there was a report that came out this week from the New Jersey State Commission of Investigation talking about the business practices of the three owners of the CarePoint health facilities at Hudson.
Yeah.
Obviously, one is in Jersey City, needless to tell you. And the long story short was that report said that they had all these limited liability companies that diverted $157 million between 2013 and 2016. Yeah. Obviously, we could go on, but that's the basic point of it. So, I mean, what was your thoughts after you read this thing?
I mean, look, obviously it's concerning to say the least, and it's a lot of money, and I think that when Trenton changed the out-of-network billing structure last year. I think that this was what they were looking to correct, clearly. And had this information been available years earlier, I think that legislation probably would have changed earlier. I think nobody likes to see the system being taken advantage of, and that's kind of what it feels like.
Okay. Now, one of those guys, Vivek Garipalli, gave $1 million contribution to Coalition for Progress in 2016, and that was a super PAC people have said you were going to use if you ran for governor. Obviously, you didn't. But, is this somebody that, you've spoken to on CarePoint matters and do you regularly speak to? Or?
No, I haven't spoken to Vivek in quite some time. I mean, obviously, I'm not directly involved in Coalition for Progress. Let me start there. And,
sure.
I know that they've been involved in federal races and statewide races and nothing directly regarding myself. I haven't spoken to Vivek in quite some time, and nor would that ever come up as kind of a direct conversation. I don't think it would be appropriate, and or my place. I think that you have to ask the Coalition for Progress people about that. As far as communication, Vivek is spending most of his time, my understanding, is in San Francisco, focusing on insurance and Clover. I think that's their new business endeavor. And, I've met with the new CEO of CarePoint. She's certainly very, very smart and dynamic, and she's trying to think of ways to make the cost structure with the new out-of-billing network and the charity care realities of Jersey City and urban areas to make that all work. And we're trying to figure out ways to be supportive of them on that front. I mean, the $157 million obviously predates that structure today. Price Hospital still does service a lot of people in Jersey City, and we need to make sure that it doesn't go out of business.
All right, and finally, I think we're going to talk a little about public safety. So it's been a lot going on, needless to say, in 2019. I mean, we talked about it a bit before, but in short, no more off-duty details. There's a new police union contract. More officers have been hired, and I believe this is the largest firefighter class, I guess, that Jersey City's ever had. So, that's a whole lot. But just when we're talking about those public safety issues, I mean, I know you've reiterated many times that you've taken pride in making sure that the police department and the fire department succeed. So tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
Look, you could just look at the trends in crime over the last couple months and the last year. There's no denying the fact it's trending downward and downward aggressively. And the police department is doing a great job, and I think we have the best fire department in the state of New Jersey, if not the pound for pound in the country. We've invested a lot of money in both of those, adding more people, restructuring policies. Now, prior to 2013, there were a lot of things in place that we thought made very, very little sense on how people can take off, what staffing requirements were, what they needed to do, what they were allowed to do, what they could wear, what they couldn't wear. And, people don't always like change. But we came in and we had two choices. We could either just accept the status quo and, go along and get along and just see where things go, or we could be aggressive with change. And we thought that change was important, and the results are speaking for themselves. I know everybody's not happy with every decision we make, but I think that if you look at the entire body of how we've supported both those organizations, that both unions, when you're looking at it fair, you would certainly fall on the side of that we've been an advocate for public safety, pretty much second to none. You may not love every decision we make, but when you look at it, the give and take and back and forth, by and large, we've been on the side of public safety. If you are a resident of Jersey City, I don't know how you couldn't love the changes that we've made. We've expanded both of them. We've diversified our department. We've created more community policing initiatives. We've taken a lot of illegal guns off the street. We're driving down crime. We've increased CCTV. We revamped the CCTV that didn't work. We changed the 911 system. We've done so much on that front to make Jersey City what it should be on public safety, and I'm really proud of it.
All right, excellent. So, Steve, I think you would agree with me. We've covered quite a bit today.
Yeah,
anything else
great.
you wanted to...
No, it's just it's nice to spend some time with you, and I appreciate the people that are watching, and I'm always open for suggestions and feedback. feedback. I think that, the best way that we're going to get better here is, engaging the community, and that's why we try and do stuff like this.
Very good. Steve, always a pleasure. Let's
Thank
not
you.
wait a year next
Thank
time.
you. Fair.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in. Have a fantastic weekend.